Hello, beautiful friends. It's Melinda with Shamanic Dolls, also known as Cybele Blondeloch, and I wanted to come to you with a bedtime story. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and it seemed like the good time to do it. Um, I am a person who is in love with fairy tales. And so it's something that I really like to share with people when I have the chance. Um, so if you're watching this live, let me know if you have any troubles hearing me or anything like that. I'm just using my computer audio, so hopefully it works okay. And if not, let me know in the comments. Um, but I have a beautiful, beautiful story to share with you this evening, and I'm hoping that if you're scrolling and feeling anxiety or feeling like you're getting caught up in the world, this might be a really beautiful story for you to bring some peace to your mind. It's a Grimm's fairy tale. Um, Grimm's is I'm sure many of you are familiar. We are very familiar with quite a lot of these stories, but there are so many Grimm's fairy tales that people don't share, that are just not often repeated, and they should be. And this is one of those. It's not one that I hear told often. And it is absolutely one of my favorites. It's very beautiful. It's called The Goose Girl and the Well. At the Well. The Goose Girl at the Well. So I'm going to tell the story, and hopefully it relaxes you enough, and maybe you'll fall asleep. They are designed as bedtime stories after all. And if you'd like to stick around, I'm going to talk a little bit about the story and my interpretation, and maybe see what lessons are hiding within the story. So I'm going to just turn my little timepiece so that I can track a little bit. And this is The Goose Girl at the Well. Once upon a time, in a time beyond time, there was a very old woman, and she lived in a tiny little cottage that was tucked away in one of those waste spaces between two hills. And there she tended to her flock of geese, who loved and adored her as though she were their mother. Now, old and frail and fragile as she would journey every single day into the dark forest that surrounded the commons. And there she would toil day and night, working with her scythe to slice big, big bushels of grasses and collect all the fruits, apples, and berries into big baskets. And whenever she saw someone passing by, one of the villagers, she would greet them kindly and say, "Hello, beautiful day, fine weather." Oh, but the villagers, they were afraid of her. And whenever a father with his children came near, he would clutch them to him and say, "Don't go near her. She has claws beneath her gloves. She is a witch." For as frail as she was, she carried such a load it bowed her low to the ground, and yet she always just shrugged her shoulders and said, "'Tis my burden to bear." So one day, a very handsome man came strolling through the forest. Now he was a young lad, and he had decided to take a little leisure time for himself. And so he journeyed from town to town, exploring the world as was his right. And he had been all day through the forest, a beautiful day. The sun was shining through the leaves, and a little breeze was waving through. And he came upon this old, old woman. And when he saw this load, he said, "Madame, you cannot carry such a satchel." And she laughed heartily and said, "Ha! 'Tis my burden to bear." But then She scanned him with her eyes and said, the children of the wealthy, they don't know what it is to bear the burdens. But we peasants, as the saying goes, never look back, for all you will see is your crooked back. Well, the young man replied, you're right. My father is a wealthy count, and I too will be a count. But to show to you that my class too know how to work, I will offer to carry your bundle for you. Oh, she said, and she jumped up and she fastened the bundle to his back like that. And with laughter and glee, she took the baskets and she hung them over his arms, and they were filled with apples and berries and pears from the wild. And she said, oh, wonderful. It is but an hour's walk. It will be nothing to you. Your legs are so strong and your back is so straight. Oh, an hour's walk. The young lad's face grew rueful, and she just laughed and said, oh, it is light, isn't it? No, madame, it is not, said the lad. This bushel weighs as heavy as if it were filled with stones, and these baskets feel as heavy as though they're filled with lead. Oh, typical, said the old woman. Yes, typical. I see how your kind are, so ready with fair words. But when it comes time to act in earnest, you fly away like the breeze. So, what choice did he have? He had to carry out his obligation. And so, off they set for the little cottage in the woods. Now, as long as he was walking along on stable ground and on the flat surface, he managed. But once they started to ascend the hills, oh, he did start to toil, and the ground beneath him started to slide as though it were alive with the stones underfoot. Madame, please, I must rest, he said to her. Not here, not here, she said. Wait till we get where we're going. He was getting tired, and with every step, beads of sweat began to form on his head, and as they ran down his back, it was like flames. On and on they went, and with every step, the burden grew heavier. And with every step, the old woman began skipping more gaily and laughing and dancing around the lad until he started to feel very frustrated indeed. At last he said, woman, you have no shame. And he went and he tried to throw the bundle to the ground. But he could not. For the satchel, the baskets, all were fixed to him as though they had grown there. So on the fellow climbed, on and on and on. And every step his bones began to ache and feel brittle as though they were going to crumble beneath him. And the woman laughed and laughed and skipped until all at once she jumped into the air and landed straight upon his back, square on his shoulders. And frail and waifish as she was, she weighed as much as the sturdiest country lass. So on he went, and if he slowed, she hit him with a switch of stinging nettles, so that he had no choice but to oblige this torture. At long, long last, he got to the top of the hill, and there down below in the valley he could see the little cottage, and there were the little geese who came, once they saw the old woman, running towards them with their wings outstretched, calling out, "Goo-goo!" happy to see her, like they were running to their own mother. And as they came up the hill, toddling behind her, the geese, was a dowdy, stout, sturdy woman, middle-aged, strong, and ugly as night. There's no better way to say it. "Oh, mother," she said, speaking to the old woman, "where have you been? I've been so worried. You've been gone for so long. I thought something had happened to you." "Oh, daughter, my little goose girl," said the old woman, "nothing of the kind. Quite the opposite. I met this kind young man, and he has been so generous to carry my bushel for me, and when I got tired, offered to carry me on his own back. Isn't that kind? And the way has not been long. We've been making merry and jokes upon each other the whole long way. It has been a fine day." At great length, the old woman finally stopped speaking and relieved the lad of his heavy burden, and finally he set the things down, exhausted. She bade him sit down beside a nice, beautiful apple tree. There was a bench, and she told the goose girl, "Now go fetch him a nice cold draught, and be careful now. You don't stay outside here with him. One only needs to pour oil on the fire, and he'll fall deeply in love with you." Well, the young man did not know whether to laugh or cry at this, because even if this woman were 30 years younger, surely she could not stir his heart. So he rested, and as he sat there, the cool breeze ran across his skin. There was a beautiful green meadow all around, with a golden stream trickling past where the white geese were floating up and down, not making a sound. And all around were blooming flowers, primroses and cowslips and wild thyme. He thought, "This is a beautiful place. I could stay here forever." And he fell fast asleep. And he might be sleeping there still, had not the old woman come and roused him with a jostle. "You can't stay here," she said. And so he woke. "Now, I know I have been harshly treating you. I admit it. But don't worry. I have a reward for you," she said. "And it's not land and it's not money, because I know you don't need any of those things, but something precious." And with that, she handed him a tiny little book that was carved out of a single emerald. Well, the lad took his reward and departed from that place immediately without a backwards glance, not even for the pretty daughter. And he traveled for quite a distance, and still even heard the echo of the geese in the back of his mind for quite some time. And he traveled on yet, and further, until 2 whole days had passed, and he grew completely lost. And when he had thought for sure he was never going to see another soul, he came upon a city, a kingdom that he had never heard of before. And the people there, they were suspicious types. And upon seeing this stranger, they took him immediately to the king and queen, who were sitting on their thrones. And so when the young count came before the king and queen, he fell to his knee and he presented to the queen the little emerald book, which she took into her lap, and she opened it. And when she looked inside, immediately she fell as if dead to the floor. Well, the count was seized by the king's guards immediately, and they would have hauled him off to prison, and he would have been there still, had not the queen woken up and insisted that they release him, for she needed to speak with him alone. She made everyone leave, including the king. And once she was alone with the lad, she told him this story. "We have 3 daughters. the youngest of which was so beautiful. To look upon her was to look at the rising sun. Her eyes were like suns, and her hair was as silky as freshly woven silk shining in the sunlight. And her cheeks were as rosy as apples. When she was 15 years old, her father, the king, bade the 3 daughters come before him. And oh, you should have seen the way everyone gazed at her when she walked into the room. It was as though an angel had appeared. When they all arrived, the king said to the girls, I know not how long I shall live on this earth, and so I must divide my kingdom amongst you 3. But whoever loves me best shall receive the greatest portion. So, daughters, how much do you love me? Our oldest daughter, the princess, said, Father, I love you more than the sweetest sugar. And our middle daughter, the princess, said, Father, I love you more than the most beautiful gown. But our youngest daughter, the princess, was silent. Speak, said the king. How much do you love me? Father, I can compare my love with nothing, she told the king. But the king insisted. And at long last, the princess said to her father, the finest food is tasteless to me without salt. And so, Father, I love you like salt. Well, the king flew into a rage. Salt, he said. If you love me like salt, then you shall be repaid in salt. And with that, he forced a barrel of salt to be fastened to her back. And then the servants took her and left her in the wild wood to fend for herself in isolation. Oh, we pleaded and we cried, the king told the lad. We begged the king to relinquish his anger, but he wouldn't. For days we wept. And at long last, the king relinquished his anger, but only after we had hidden every single grain of salt. And he found what a mistake he had made. And so we set a search party out, searching for our beautiful daughter, the princess, but it was all in vain. She was never seen. And so every day I wake in agony and sorrow, wondering if she was devoured by wild beasts. And sometimes I comfort myself, hoping that perhaps she found a cave to sleep in, or some kind stranger has taken her in. But you might be surprised to know that when my daughter cried, it was not tears that fell from her eyes, but pearls. Beautiful pearls, unlike any other I had ever seen. And so you might imagine my surprise when I opened this emerald book of yours and found inside a beautiful pearl, just like the ones that used to fall from my daughter's eyes. So now you must tell me, where did you come by this pearl? Well, the young lad, the count, was amazed at this tale. And so he recounted for the queen all that he had seen in the wood with the old woman and the strange geese, and he suspected that she was a witch, and of course the older daughter, but of the princess he had seen nothing. Well, said the queen. "Where there is a pearl of this kind, I shall find news of her. So you must take me to her, to this old woman." And so they planned for a journey into the forest. Now, meanwhile, the old woman was sitting in her cottage, weaving on her loom, and the Goose Girl came toddling back home with all the geese, and she said scarcely a word to her mother. But there was a knock on the window, and as the old woman looked out, she saw the fiery eyes of an old owl. And she said, "Daughter, it is time for you to go do your work." And so the Goose Girl walked out the door, and far down the hill she went in the darkness. And just as she came through the valley, past the stream and the brook, there was a well. It stood by 3 oak trees, and the moon was coming out so full and so bright that you could find a needle by it. And so there she sat, and she took off her skin of her face, and she set it down beside her. And she washed herself, and she bathed herself in the cool, clean waters, and her hair fell down, silky as freshly woven silk in the sun, and only her eyes peered out like suns, like stars. And her skin reflected the moonlight, and she was beautiful. And there she sat beside the waters of the well, and wept, and wept, and wept, and her tears flowed down through her hair and into the grass. And she would have been sitting there weeping still, had not she heard a crack in the boughs of the branches just across the way. And like a shot, she grabbed her mask and slipped back into her skin and ran up the hill. Luckily, a cloud came and concealed the moon just for her, and she was gone like a doe at the sound of a gun. Now, when she got back to the cottage, she told her mother what had happened. She was shaking like an aspen leaf, but the old woman said, "Ha! I already know all. Now you must help me clean this house. It must be spotless." "Mother," said the Goose Girl, "do you not know what time it is? It is not yet midnight, but after 11. "Do you not know what day it is?" said the old woman. "It has been 3 years to the day since you came to me, and you can stay here no longer. And I must move on from this place, therefore it must be spick and span." The Goose Girl pleaded with the old woman. "Don't leave me here. Please don't leave me. I have no family to turn to. I have no friends, nowhere to go. Have I not been good to you? Have I not pleased you with my work? Please don't leave me." Now the old woman grew stern. "Don't interrupt my work. Go into your room. Put on the old gown, the beautiful one that you wore to me when I found you, and take that mask from your face, and do not come out until I call you," she said. So when last we heard of the king and the queen and the count, they were beginning their journey into the forest. Well, the count had gone on ahead to find the way, while the king and queen created an encampment and waited for his return. But he traveled again for 2 days and again grew quite lost, until he was afraid that as night fell he would be overcome by beasts and the darkness, and so he climbed into a tree to sleep and pass the night there. But you can imagine how shocked and amazed he was when he saw the Goose Girl toddling down the hill just before his eyes. And he thought, "Aha! Where one witch is, there I shall soon find the other." But you can also imagine his astonishment when she removed the skin of her face and washed it in the waters and left it to bleach in the moonlight. And there, in front of him to behold, was the most beautiful creature that he had ever before seen. And he leaned forward, barely breathing, until the bough beneath his seat cracked, and of course she jumped up and flitted away so fast it was like a light being blown out by the wind. Well, he scampered to the ground and went to chase after her, hoping to find the cottage. And just as he came up the hill, there he saw two figures coming over the hill. And it was the king and queen, who had seen the light in the windows of the cottage and had somehow been beckoned there. And so they all three headed towards the cottage trepidatiously. They got to the window and they peered in, and there was the old woman alone, spinning and weaving. And they watched for some time until the old woman said, "Come in, I know you're there." And so they opened the door. "You might have spared yourself the trouble," she said to them, "had you not cast your precious daughter out for no reason, she who was so innocent and who loved you so. But never you mind. She's been here, tending my geese, and in all that while she has never learned any evil. But you, on the other hand, have suffered greatly for your sins." And it was true. And with that, she beckoned the princess to come out of her bedroom, and she did. And when she stepped into the room again, it was as though an angel had appeared. And the king and the queen, upon seeing her, burst into tears, and she fell upon their necks, and they all hugged one another, and they cried. And oh, the king, he was filled with remorse. And when the princess perceived the count, she blushed, yet she did not know why. The king said to his daughter, "I have divided my kingdom between your elder sisters, and I have nothing to give you. Nothing. I'm sorry." He tried to say it, but "Never you mind," said the old woman. "She doesn't need anything from you. For I have saved every single one of her tears, and her tears are pearls, all of them more beautiful and more valuable than any that you could find in the sea. And her tears are more precious than your entire kingdom. And not only that, but I shall give her this house." And with that she vanished like smoke. And there was a great knocking on the walls, and a creaking and a cracking, and the house expanded, and it became a grand palace, more beautiful and more grand than any of them had seen before. And all around them were servants bustling and hustling and making a great feast. Now, there is more to the story. But my grandmother, who told it to me, she was quite old, and she lost her memory, and she never could remember how it ended. But I do suspect that perhaps the count and the princess were married. And if they were, they stayed there in that beautiful place till their end of their days. And it's possible that all those geese, those beautiful white geese, were in fact other lasses who the old woman had taken into her care, who were now happily servants and townspeople in the palace, where they made for a beautiful community and grew together until the end of their days. But I don't know. We can only guess. And that is the story of the Goose Girl at the well. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Michael. I don't know who else is watching. So that's the end of the tale. Um, Beautiful story. I love this one so much. Um, it's one of the few stories that um, really has such an empowered princess who, at the end of the story, she doesn't need the prince to reward her, or she doesn't need require the prince to give her the riches or the kingdom. She has earned it all on her own. Um, but I'm going to go through some of the archetypes that are in this story because I find this one really beautiful and really meaningful. And I've made some notes about some little lessons that we can take away from each one, each character. Thank you all for watching. This is really fun to do. Mhm. Hi, Dana. You're welcome. This is my joy. So one of the, I guess I'll just start at, I wrote notes because I did. There are two masculine archetypes that are represented. We've got the king and we've got the count. And the king in this story is the patriarchy. He is the power structure, the expectation, the status quo. And in this story, he's undone by his unwillingness to see the truth that is being offered to him. He's so determined to have it exactly how he wants it that he misses the more beautiful truth that is right before him. He actually misses the wealth that he actually has. He loses it by trying to force definition on what really is not able, is not able to be defined. Um, there are a lot of these examples. I think of King Lear by Shakespeare and the Cordelia character who is cast away because she's so honest and the father doesn't want that honesty. He doesn't trust the truth. He doesn't want to see the truth. It's a similar story here. So maybe Shakespeare borrowed from these folk tales. I don't know. I'm sure he borrowed from all the folk tales. So the lesson from the king is don't assume that you know what others are thinking. And don't assume that your interpretation of what others are saying is accurate. In other words, people may be trying to tell you something, and as we're filtering that through our own perception, we might miss the grander gift of what they're offering to us. Be willing to learn and understand the genuine truth of those around you, or you may be faced with regret for what you've missed. Good lesson from the king. So if you're resonating with that king character, that's a good lesson to take away with you. On the opposite end of the spectrum is this count. He is the alternative to that in the masculine form. He is a very, very masculine character, but he's the nobility. He is the honor. He is always kind and courteous. He has a duty to maybe it's to his family, maybe it's to his title. But whatever his duty is, he's determined to keep his word, even when it becomes uncomfortable, even when it becomes torturous. He said he'd do it, and so he does it. He displays his honor multiple times. Once when he's helpful to the old woman, and then again when he gives the gift to the queen, even though he just got this beautiful gift, and he gives it to her immediately without a second thought to do the right thing and be honorable and to show his respect. And it's that earns their trust. So he is a trustworthy character. And I think that is what is rewarded, probably far beyond what he would expect, because he's tested and he passes those tests. He has those virtues. He is rewarded. And this is the pattern in all fairy tales. The virtue is rewarded. The haughtiness, the rudeness, the ego is punished. So the gift from the Count is being noble, curious, and willing to offer help when it is in your power to do so is what will make you trusted by everyone. And you will be rewarded beyond what you can imagine is possible for you. So that's the gift of the Count. So now I'm going to go into the feminine, which is very fun because there are some beautiful feminine archetypes here. The princess, she is the quintessential embodiment of the feminine mysteries. She is a bearer of incredible beauty and then has to be responsible for what that means. With great beauty also comes sometimes a burden of expectation, great expectation. And she is cast into isolation when she's not able to define that which cannot be defined. So she's a really good character for us right now at this time to look at. She's the one that actually, in this story, overthrows the patriarchy. She undoes the system. And it's because of, it's not by fighting it, it's by going into isolation and through her own suffering and through her own endurance and her own patience. Those pearls that she cries, those tears that she cries are her value, are her worth and her riches. I also look at the geese as an element of the princess because she tends the geese and she's tending to those elements of self. The geese could be looked at or interpreted. The way I interpret that is that those geese are aspects of her own talents, her own inner wisdoms, her own abilities and gifts, and the things that she must find within herself. And as she tends those things, so she becomes stronger, so she becomes more wise, and she learns. And so at the end of the day, all that she has done with her suffering, within her brokenness, from inside her brokenness, is what gives her great wealth. And that wealth surpasses that of the king. And she no longer needs the king. And she no longer needs the count. The count is a bonus that she can take if she wants or not, which is what makes this a very unique fairy tale. And there are others like this, but it's a great one to read to your daughters because she is so empowered, the princess, and in such a soft way. I'd like to speak about the queen also because she has some power in this story too. While she's actually in sort of a subservient role and maintaining the status quo and sort of stuck in it with what she's got to work with what she's got. She's got some ingenuity and she leverages what she can. She's calculating. And, there's a few different ways I've read a few different translations and interpretations of this one, but my favorite one is when she withholds the salt in order to persuade the king to change his mind about the daughter. It gives her a little power. I like that interpretation. To me, that just shows how one can turn the wheel from within, how one can work the system from within and make a small change using the power and authority that one has. And so the gift from the queen is to bide your time Act decisively and with careful consideration. Leverage what you can and watch for signs. So that is our queen. And then, of course, our very, very last archetype, who I could not live without, is our Baba Yaga, our old woman, our witch, our witch in the woods. Um, she recurs in many, 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 many stories, and she is a beautiful character. And she, she varies. There are facets to this role. And in this beautiful story, she's very much a trickster. She's a lot kinder than she is in some other stories in this one, in this version. Um, but in all of these tales, um, Baba Yaga, and oftentimes there's an enchantress, uh, sometimes interchangeable, or they'll be one or the other, or sometimes the same. Um, but oftentimes, well, always, virtue is rewarded, haughtiness and ego punished. That's the way it goes. Those are the rules. So she's beautiful, and she will tend and care for those who display virtue, and so she'll test you. So here's the gift from our witch, our Baba Yaga. Um, Be alert, there's more than meets the eye with this trickster. If you can stick it out with her and look beyond your surface level frustration, you will find that she always has the greatest good in mind, but she's going to make you work for it. So stick it out through the annoyances and through the difficulties and the challenges and the turmoil and the tough stuff. If you can stick it out and mind your manners and keep your nobility and hold tight to your virtues in the context of your difficulties, good things will come to you. Good things will come to you. So remain calm, kind, and hardworking. And so that is the gift from the witch. So that is my summary of Goose Girl at the Well. And if people are watching this live or in the future and the replays and things like that, let me know what you think. And I love these stories. I know lots of them, and I'd love to share more with you if it's fun. So I wish you all sweet, sweet dreams. Good night. Blessings.